Good evening, members and officers. First of all, do you all have a copy of the agenda?
Yep.
A little bit different, we're really, you haven't, you need a copy of the agenda. Is there an extra copy?
We're sharing that.
It's okay. Right, fire evacuation procedures. I think there's everybody in this room is familiar with the fire evacuation procedures. Peter, you're quite happy? Right, I will take those as read. Apologies for absence and substitutions. Now, I will tell you that I was informed by email that the Labour group, as en bloc, will not attend today's proceedings because they are providing support to their colleagues, I believe is the expression in the email that I received, in unison and a day of action nationally. That's their decision. I have apologies from Councillor Parker. I have no other apologies from Councillor Hussey. Is it?
Haven't heard from him.
No. So he is an absentee.
And I'm tendering apologies on behalf of Councillor.
I'm tendering apologies on behalf of Councillor Cubitt, and I am substituting for her, if that's possible.
Very possible, Councillor Behrman. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest of anything on the agenda tonight? Urgent matters. I've been notified of no urgent matters this evening. Appointment of vice chairman. Now, the Constitution as rewritten and looks at the components of the committees. At full council, the chairman of the scrutiny and the two policy committees were voted in at full council. It is the role of the committees to elect their vice chairman. Now, we all know that Councillor Keith Watts was voted as chair of scrutiny. He has a vice chair from another of the political groups within the council. The two policy committees adopt the same principle. We have two Conservatives chairs for this committee and the Communities Partnerships Committee, Councillor Rob Golding. And the form is that we elect a non-administration, albeit a minority administration, vice chairman. I will go through this procedurally. Do we have any nominations from those present for a vice chair?
Have you had any indications of persons wishing or hoping to be in that position, Chair?
Nope.
I move we hold it over to the next meeting, because without their being here, we can't really nominate them if we've not given advance notice. And I, speaking as a non-administration person, know not who they might like. I know who they might be for next week's meeting, but for this week, I have no idea.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Behrman. You took the words out of my mouth, because at the moment I declare that with no nominations, the vice chair is currently vacant and will remain so until the next appropriate meeting, when I will call for nominations at that meeting. If you could note that, please.
Yep.
Thank you. The other thing I will say at this particular stage, you will see me turning to Stefan here. In all these meetings as constituted, he, or certainly committee services, will be represented to the chair. No longer will you see a technical officer in that seat. You see, my from P&I, my left-hand buddy's gone. She didn't want to sit next to me anymore. But this is the way that the format will go. Any questions on the Constitution, any questions on procedure, any on how we progress these particular meetings from those two aspects, I will defer to Stefan for the officer professional viewpoint. And he's got his Constitution underneath the chair, I think. The technical officers, if necessary, will be available depending on the subjects of the agenda, and they will be asked at the appropriate times to come to the table. The portfolio holders, now this will be, any reports will be owned by the portfolio holders, and they would normally, I would suspect, be sitting on my right-hand side. If any reports are to be presented, they would normally be presented by the portfolio holder. It's just sort of a different pattern of what we're doing. Agenda item number 5, minutes of committee meetings held on the 23rd of April and 24th of April 2014. This is an inheritance from the previous organisation. There are new councillors around, and I'm advised that as the chairman of this committee, unless there's any observations from the members present, I will go ahead and sign them. Agreed? That's just what I said. Because the constitutional members of these committees have changed, this is a procedural exercise. If there's any comments, and they haven't been presented to this committee by anybody or submitted in relation to those minutes, I will go ahead and sign them.
What I was trying to suggest is that if Councillor Bean felt that there was a problem, then she should say so. But if she was kind enough to assure us that it was correct, then we would feel happier.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Lee. If she would wish to, yes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, they look to me like a true and accurate record of the meeting that was held.
There we are.
Thank you, Councillor Bean.
He was vice chair.
Item 6, tree appeal single issue panel appointments. To consider and appoint members to the tree appeal single issue panel. The committee are asked to note that Councillor Bierman, Councillor Paul Frankham, Councillor Ron Hussey, Councillor Gavin James and Councillor Marion Tucker are all content to remain on the panel from the 2014-15 municipal year. Councillor Lee.
What is a tree appeal single issue panel?
It's when a resident, Councillor Bierman might be able to correct me if I get this wrong, but if a resident applies to, for example, one has just come into our particular ward, wants to trim down a TPO tree or address an issue with a tree and it's turned down, they can go to the appeal panel. If I've got that wrong, Councillor Bierman, please correct me.
If I may, I will correct you slightly. It's nothing to do with TPOs because they're handled separately through the planning committee. It's council-owned trees. So if we've got council-owned trees on land, be it a verge or open land adjacent to a property, and it's causing nuisance, and the person wishes to take action to either fell the tree or have it trimmed back, it goes to officers. If ward members are not happy with it being dealt with under delegated powers by officers, it can go before the panel, and they then determine what happens.
Thank you for the brief, and for all your information, the terms of reference of that panel are being distributed to you now, so we can keep that for future reference. Don't worry, Councillor Lee. Can I ask that the committee is in agreement that the members' names I just read out are confirmed? Thank you very much.
copies of the, the work programme that we gave you.
Mhm.
What else? And the items that Labour put forward, if you want us to give them out.
That one. I've got a couple of additions. Right. Agenda item number 6. We're going to, I think I've got the work program there. We're going to distribute a draft work program for the committee that, again, I've been kindly supported very heavily by the officers, and I've got an update. This is, I use the expression downstairs as started for 10. The work program is our work program. We talked around the whole subject of the work program in the training session. If you'd just like to glance at this, we've got to try and sort of plan ahead, and the suggestion from the directors that we examine this at every meeting to make sure we're up to speed with what our future program is. I'm going to ask Stefan to make sure that it's included as an agenda item on the regular proceedings of this committee. So it's something that we physically have to address. We deliberately have to address this at every meeting. The dates you see in here, if you've got a copy of this, the date of the meeting, these are already in the planned committee dates that we all have access to. And the way that the subjects appear in the program are driven by council dates, where confirmation has to be determined at full council, cabinet dates. There's all kinds of variables that come into the kind of what drives these particular dates. It doesn't mean to say we can't do anything in addition to if it is urgent. We don't want to. It's the exception, very much the exception and not the rule, that we automatically think for another meeting. It depends on the subject matter. This is coming back to the word flexibility I used earlier on. For the 10th of July, been and gone, that's tonight, we're going to discuss and agree a work program. Now, you see for the 11th of September, review the work program, adoption of public space landscape management functions. So there you have the scope of one issue for the 11th of September. I'm willing to accept any inputs into this, by the way. It's not rigid. Councillor Marks.
I noticed you got seal there. What's the aim and objective of looking at the seal? Do we actually have where we're coming from, where we're going to for it?
The SIL, there's various draft documents that have already been produced by Basingstoke and Dean about the SIL. That was a marker that was put in that we have to address the subject. Long before September, we'll be pushing out to the committee the expansion of that. What we're doing tonight is putting these markers down on subjects we have to address. How deep we have to address it, because it's a brand new concept in terms of getting money from developers, is to expand it out. And I'm not sure whether it's going to be a sort of semi-scrutiny exercise, or do we have to evolve the levy and address it from a policy viewpoint? I can't answer that question at the moment. Councillor Lee.
Forgive me, I thought we'd adopted the SIL, to be quite honest. But, we discussed it at the former Planning and Infrastructure Committee, so what would we be doing at this stage?
Is it Bramacom?
We haven't adopted it. What you discussed before then went out to, we've been doing more work on it and consultation on it, so it would be coming back to this committee en route to being adopted by council ultimately. So officers felt that it was something, because it would have so much impact on your community, that you probably would want to see it and have a look at it and discuss it before you actually saw it in council.
We did approve it at council, though, didn't we? And was it approved? My recollection was that we approved it. Did we not? Oh.
I'll double check, but you approved the local plan at council for consultation. I don't believe SIL went to council. I think SIL went to cabinet for consult before it went out to consultation. I think the intention is that SIL now goes back to cabinet, but that it comes here first.
That's very kind. Unfortunately, I shall be at the proms that night, so I won't be able to contribute.
Councillor Marks.
I don't wish to be pedantic, but we're going to have a paper, an officer paper coming to us regarding the SIL. Is it going to be a recommendation that this is where we've got to, this is what's happened? Can you read it? Can you adopt it? Or can you say it's good, so it goes to cabinet, full council? Or are we going to make comments? Because again, I'm thinking what we said downstairs.
Right. If we were embarking on a standing start, I would agree with you. Unfortunately, we've got inertia behind us. I happen to be the chair of P&I, as you very well know, for the last year, and there's some things coming down the pipe that we can't stop. And so, if you like, that is as a result of the process that's been ongoing now for SIL for the last 18 months, 2 years. So we have to play catch up. So that's why we've got it on here. It will be a recommendation. We won't make any decisions in this committee ever. This will be recommendations or proposals that will go from this committee to either council or more normally to the portfolio holder and cabinet. So that's the only reason it's there. Don't worry, as soon as we can, we'll certainly notify the members of the committee exactly what, in the broad terms of what we aim to do on that particular meeting and that particular subject. The other one is to provide a response to the motion. It's to do creating areas of land for future. It's to do this liability that was raised at a couple of P&I meetings last year, and it's all to do with the maintenance and the liability coming back to the council. So that'll be a drafting and recommendation exercise of that particular meeting. It's the legal liability, basically, and financial fiduciary liability that the council holds.
It wasn't quite like that, actually. It was that some members raised the issue that people purchasing a house were finding that they were required to make a contribution, and as I said, that's caveat emptor. And if I was available that night, which I'm not, I would certainly be making that point again. It really is up to individuals to make sure they don't enter into contracts which leave them with a liability. I don't see why we should be discussing it, but there we are.
As you're not going to be attending the next meeting, Councillor Lake, may I ask you, because it's now the responsibility of the individual who doesn't attend to get one of the substitutes, and raise that, your substitute can raise that point in whatever way you would ask him to do so. Thank you. 9th of October.
By the 11th of September, the results of the consultation on the local plan will have been received, and I don't see anywhere where there will be a report. Well, there should be a report because we've had endless reports on the local plan, and it does seem to me that even if the report simply said there were no substantive comments, that is a report. But I know there are some substantive comments because Wootton St Lawrence Parish Council is extremely concerned about the lack of a bypass, western bypass, and has raised that issue. So I think it is important that somewhere there is a report back on the issues raised as a result, as part of the consultation on the local plan, and I would hope that members would support me on that.
The process that the local plan has gone through in its draft stages and gone out to consultation twice now, and I will repeat the message from the portfolio holder, is that at this particular stage, unless there are deemed to be substantive issues to be raised in the local plan, it will go from the end of the consultation period to examination. Unless I hear of anything else, that is what I expect it to do, but it will not come from me. It will come from either the portfolio holder or the cabinet. And when we get notified, then I will advise you if there's going to be a report. But it's nothing to do with us at the moment.
Chair, bearing in mind, as Councillor Leake has sought support, I too was wondering how one might be having some feedback into this committee. Now, there's no point in having a great agenda item to discuss something that we can't change. However, I do think it might be prudent, given that there might be substantive changes, and it seems to me from what I've seen of the draft plan, there were all sorts of googlies in there that might need yet further deliberation by what is now this committee, sadly, but it does look like that. Even if that's not going to be, wouldn't it be prudent to at least have some allocated slots? Because if it does come back, sure as anything, it's not going to be a 5-minute chat. One's got to be prepared for it. And then if it isn't necessary, one can always strike it. But if it isn't there in the first place, then you've got the problem of getting people together because we've got to have this urgent discussion, as happened previously on the last draft.
I will defer to Mrs. Birmingham to respond to that.
It might be useful just to remind you of exactly what you agreed at council when you considered the local plan. It was, if there are minor changes, so council has delegated authority to the portfolio holder if there are minor changes to the revised pre-submission local plan prior to and following public consultation. But if there are to be major changes, so substantive changes like Councillor Bierman referred to, then those have to be reported back to council prior to the submission to the Secretary of State, so it would go back to full council if there are to be substantive changes. And I am aware that the portfolio holder intends to give all members details of any changes he has agreed to, if they are minor, and he submits it without going back to full council. I know he intends to inform members of what those changes were.
Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Chair. I know that there was very clearly made clear that we weren't going to have another bite at it, all of the things being equal, unless there was this substantial thing. I am fearful of, if there is that substantial thing, that going straight to council, because the idea of full council having a meaningful debate about details of the local plan fills me with more than horror. I think I'd be ready to jump down the stairlift there, stairwell at the back. Some bits, but certainly not all of it. I mean, yes, I accept that that's what was agreed, but I speak in fear of that prospect. Perhaps the idea is to deter anybody from wanting to debate it. I don't know.
Actually, I'm even more concerned because Councillor Bierman has just said that he knows what the substantive comments are and has suggested that there are major issues. I think that's what you said. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, if you don't mind. But I fully appreciate that, but we have a decision from council. We might have all the misgivings in the world at the moment, unless we get requested by the portfolio holder or the cabinet. That's the way it's going to be. I'm sorry. Look, I appreciate and I acknowledge what Councillor Bierman said, because I think none of us want to face the reality of that in council, but that is what council has agreed.
Maybe I'll have to call it in.
I take on board exactly the sentiments of what's just been said, so don't worry. 9th of October, you might like to annotate, again, this was, these are some additions that we've been talking about, is commissioning is one subject that we've penciled in for that particular date. This is commissioning in general, and I don't yet know of the details of the particular subjects, but you know it's a fairly wide-ranging subject, going from medical services to buses to all kinds of things. So as soon as we get some more details of that, we will let the committee know. Councillor Lee.
I'm sorry to be boring, but I'm taking a special interest in commissioning just at the moment, and the head of commissioning has advised me that it's likely that the whole commissioning process will be called in by scrutiny, or will be just considered by scrutiny in September. So it would be rather odd if scrutiny discussed it in September and we discussed it in October. So I think it would be helpful if officers could advise us to the likely route that will take.
I think it's just a pencil in holding, Councillor Taylor? Mr. Taylor? I wouldn't inflict that on you.
You're quite right. We do have an indication that the Scrutiny Committee do want to review the commissioning programme in their early September meeting now. That meeting date has moved. So I think, if I might suggest, Chair, you have a bit of space at the bottom, items to be timetabled. You could hold that there pending the outcome of that scrutiny discussion, perhaps, because otherwise you may just get the same paper or a different version of it. So I think we do need to perhaps have some conversation with the Chair of Scrutiny as to what he's anticipating there with yourself. Perhaps would be useful.
In our training, you know, the idea of looking backwards and forwards just on one subject does seem not very helpful. So I do hope that only one committee will look at it. I have to say, from what I've seen of the commissioning process, it's a complete nonsense, and I hope we get rid of it pretty quickly. Thank you.
Okay, just a comment on that, and this is something that I think Peter and I and Laura have been discussing about this, looking forward and looking back. There is nothing wrong with scrutiny examining, let's take commissioning. If they identify that there's something that needs improvement in the way that the council is addressing the whole subject of commissioning, then it's a logical progression for that subject or that element of that subject to come back to this committee, where we can discuss how we change the whole policy of commissioning or an aspect of commissioning, and provide a recommendation to either council or the portfolio holder or cabinet. So if you can look at it in those terms, and I'm using these opportunities to help us get an understanding of how the committees work, that we can then look forward and we can do our own investigation. We can have the ideas coming from the members of the committee. And that's how I see it. And I am totally with you. I would not accept, and I will tell you this right now, I will not accept the same paper that goes to scrutiny to come to this committee, ever, because we are looking at it from different perspectives. They do their work, they identify the problem. Then to address the problem, because they'll get overloaded if they start getting bogged down in drafting a new policy, it comes to us, because we have the mechanisms and the thought processes in place and the access to the expertise to move it forward towards a policy for the borough. Happy? That's where we want to go. That's how we want this train to move. Thank you. On the same date, 9th of October, there's another one we need to pencil in there again, but lacking details. It's this question of homelessness. That has been suggested as a good date because, again, we're being driven by, I can't remember on that one, homelessness was for council towards the end of the year. Thinking aloud now.
Chairman, if I can help, the Scrutiny Committee 2 days ago looked at the quarterly performance reports. Councillor Musson was there as well. and I think they suggested this committee might wish to look at the underlying issues were about the numbers of people in B&B accommodation, the lack of affordable housing, those sorts of issues.
I can understand exactly where that's come from now in that context. I mean, I certainly think there is something to a piece of work that could very usefully be done there. The only issue I would flag up is, although I'm a bit fearful given the previous comments, there is a commissioning outcome group, a COG, looking at the issue of housing and homelessness at the minute. I can't quite remember off the top of my head the timescale that's working to, but it might be useful to look at it in the context of what they're recommending, perhaps. Clearly up to you.
Now that lovely acronym has appeared, the COG, there's various COGs, four this year, there's 4 COGs. That's another source of input into the, potentially, the sources of subject matter to come to this committee during the year. Variable feast, because it depends on what progress they make and how they fit in with the terms of reference of this particular committee. Councillor Beerman.
Sorry, I've been waving around and we moved onto a topic, and it's not on this topic I want to speak, but I want to register the fact that I want to make a suggestion for the agenda, unless you finish with the COGs now and the housing.
No.
Right, okay, then.
Is this a general suggestion for the work programme?
Yeah, yeah.
Could we wait to the end?
Oh, right, okay.
Please, because I've got another general remark to put at the end, and yours would probably be appropriate there.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Marks.
I don't want to push this, but if we look at homelessness, what is our aims and objectives of looking at it, please?
Closer to the time you will get that, because I am an absolute advocate of aims and objectives and outcomes. Before we address any of these topics in committee, you will have ample notice of exactly that. And it's something that we may have to dream up a format of each particular subject and have these headings in there: aim, objectives, outcomes, because that allows the committee to focus on exactly what we're doing and not wander off. We've got a focal point to come back to on each particular topic or subtopic of something like homelessness.
We've got scoping documents as well for that process.
Jolly good. You see, they beat me to it again. Councillor Musson. But they have basically templates to produce these scoping documents. So you will get a scoping document for each particular topic well before the meeting, so we know where we're going. Coming back to it, each meeting will address the work programme. That's where they will be delivered and expanded to the committee.
I was going to add some comments to the homelessness, Chairman, because I was at the scrutiny committee, and what we looked at were our own objectives, where I didn't see the numbers, but I believe we've got objectives as to what these initiatives like homelessness are supposed to be meeting, and they'd used a traffic light system, red, amber, and green. And homelessness was one of the few that were red across all of the quarters for a year. So we're not meeting our own aims and objectives clearly. Now, it could be our aims and objectives are wrong. It could be that we're doing a bad job. I don't know, but something needs to be done to look at it. If we're not meeting what our own criteria are, something needs to be done. The other two, I think, were to do with waste management.
And the aims of objective, I hear what you say. I understand traffic light systems pretty well. But the aims of objectives of this committee to address a topic, there's the aims and objectives of the subject matter as well. And I think, we'll have to differentiate between the two. Laura.
As some of us have been lucky enough to go to all of the committees so far, I just wondered if I would just be helpful to share the experience of what Scrutiny are doing. And as Councillor Musson points out, as Stefan suggested, there's a scoping document. And I think you have a choice here, as we've just discussed downstairs. You could, if you wish, ask the portfolio holder to come along on the 9th of October and set out the approach to homelessness to see if there's anything else you wish to explore there. Or you might wish to set out a small group of members to take the information from the performance panel and look at that and perhaps do a little bit of scoping and bring it back to the September meeting so you could all consider what to do there. You can always set some wheels in motion if that's what you'd like to do. But I sense maybe you're ahead of me now, Chairman. But it's just when we were talking downstairs around perhaps finding some work plans, you have got some work to do on the 11th of September, but there may be space to invite a couple of portfolio holders in to set out their position for, say, 15, 20 minutes each. And you might get some nuggets to look at for a little bit later on, perhaps. I hope that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Are we beginning to see how this is going to develop now, this work program? Because it's fairly a low level, but it's brainstorming. We're all participating in all kinds of aspects across the council. We've got COGs, we've got working panels, we've got maps, we have other committees. And in earlier discussions, this is what I said, we're looking outward and gaining any kind of information relevant to what we have to address within this committee. And other committees are going to be doing the same thing. Are we touching on a subject? We don't want to repeat subjects. We don't want to if we've got overlap, maybe we could have a joint committee. It could be mixed up of the members involved. Okay, we got overlap. Some of us are going to be on more than one committee. It doesn't matter. Then you've got one individual. We don't need the duplicate of the whole of the two committees. So this is where the flexibility comes in. And we'll try and focus on who's best able to address the particular topics. 13th of November, I'm running out of ideas because it's too far in the future. There's all kinds of other things that are going to come up, an update of the forward plan. This is negotiation. I'm taking on a lot of these roles as the chairman. I'll be talking to the portfolio holders. I'm going to be talking to the leader. I'm on all three committees, by the way. By September, I will be on all three. The two policy and the scrutiny. So I'll be members on the other two committees. Yeah, aren't I lucky? But I'll tell you one thing, I treat that as an advantage because I'm going to have an overview of what's going on to bring back to this committee where I'm the chair. Councillor Beerman, now's your opportunity, and then I've got a sort of follow on from that on a sort of general basis that I'd like to address the committee.
Chair, as a sort of non-resident member of the committee, so to speak, I'd sort of say it with some caution and uncertainty, but it does seem to me that if I were on this committee, I would be asking for us to be looking at transport issues around the borough. And the reason I mention that is there was a time when we as members, aside from the portfolio holder, used to have fairly regular meetings with the county about their strategic plans for planned transport. It's going to wind Councillor Leake up probably, sorry John, and discuss what the county was minded to be doing, and we'd have some strategic input as well as some maintenance input, not telling the county what to do, but just so that they had feedback from wider local knowledge than any of the immediate representatives could possibly have. And I think we, as a council, don't have enough of an overview or, at the moment, understanding of what the county's priorities are for transport in the borough, and a member-wide opportunity to have fed back what we look upon as the key issues on transport. And I would like to see transport, and I include with that cycling and walking, the whole highways network. And I would have thought that was a worthy subject for this committee to be looking at.
Councillor Musson?
I'd support what, as a member of this committee, appreciate that Councillor Behrman is substitute. I would support what he said. I'd use the example of the A340 between Tadley and Basingstoke, which I don't think is quite suitable for cyclists. But as a part-time cyclist, it would be nice to think that we could use it. But also, I read something about some Enterprise 3 money. I think the directors might know about that. And I was interested to know how that was going to be spent. And I was a bit concerned when I read dualling of the A340, because
well, you don't get much for 2.3 million.
You don't. But one of the concerns we have in Tadley is that there's about 15,000 vehicles a day pass up the A340. A lot of them are using it as a bypass between M3 and M4. Anything that improves that route is going to improve the likelihood of people doing it. And I support what Councillor Leake said, and that's a western bypass would probably help to alleviate some of that. So perhaps we should take the western bypass separately, not as part of the local plan, and look at that.
I agree.
I
support that strongly.
Well, don't worry. You're talking my language as well. And yes, I was going to mention that initiative and the release of central government money, looking, and there's also the freight transport study, which I think is what you're talking about. And they're looking at the three arms of the A33, the A340 and the 339. And
Crockford Lane, if I may say, interestingly, is suddenly popping up, which is supposed to be part, as you know, of another development. And now the county's doing something, and I wonder whether the county is going to be looking at doing the same thing as the developer is.
Yes, I think the point is that what Councillor Behrman endorsed and sort of reinforced by Councillor Musson, we don't have enough visibility. Now, we used to, well, there was the HATS program from county, which was focused on other things. But I think this is where, and again, we mentioned it downstairs, contact with our county councillors has got to come into play here. We do have county councillors over the borough. Not all of them are borough councillors, but the majority of them are. And I think I will certainly take it back to the Conservative group leader. Maybe you're still the chair of the Independent Forum?
I am the coordinator, yes.
Well, coordinator. Excuse, the title was wrong. But certainly I'll approach the other two major parties and ask them to address their county councillors. I think this is probably should be coming from the group leaders to actually use their county councillors as an ear to what's going on in Hampshire, certainly on transportation.
I think we should be doing both, Chair. I think it should be certainly communicating with the county councillors, and I'd welcome them all attending a meeting that was being held to discuss it. But I do think that there needs to be something coming creatively from the borough saying that these are the things, county council, we would like you to be addressing. And particularly with the sort of housing that's proposed and the impact there's going to be, we really should be having an overall strategy rather than piecemeal bits and pieces here as developments come along. We all know that if you stick an extra roundabout or an extra pavement here and there, piecemeal, you're not going to finish up with a good borough-wide network.
Again, I don't think there's going to be any dissension from that view at all. And well, no, it's this connection. I think there's been a feeling that we've been disconnected from Hampshire, but there's a way of getting around it, and we can do it through our political system. There are some connections from through the officers mechanism, but I would feel that as far as the committee is concerned, we do have our Hampshire County Council colleagues, the dual hatters and the single hatters, that we can approach and get them to feed back some information to us. And yes, I agree. Invite them to the appropriate committee at the appropriate time, because it would also be useful to know what roles they play in Hampshire County Council.
I mean, I would suggest there are more single hatters now than there were. So I think it is appropriate that we do use them to try and persuade the county, not just summon officers or portfolio holders.
I agree. Right, I've made a note of that. Have you, Steph?
Yeah.
On that one about?
Good description on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, something else I wanted to add. Thank you for that intervention, Councillor Bowman. Now, I'm going to go back to the absence of the Labour group this evening, and it's in relation to the work plan. Councillor Mrs. James did send me an email, and it included some topics that we might think would be interesting. I've deferred from bringing those topics to you this evening because it's something I would rather discuss with the Labour group present. We have in fact overlapped a couple of them this evening, and that's what I would like them to hear once we've got a sort of bit meatier program on this, to make sure that they may or may not have some extra topics they'd like to put in. But I'm not taking it as a Labour input at all. It's going to be the consensus of this committee whether their topics are relevant, or we can pencil them in and see if there's any merit in this committee addressing them, because that's what we're trying to get away from. We're looking at something meaningful, that any effort that we put into it is going to bring something of benefit to the residents of Basingstoke and Dean. So the next meeting, we will have that input. I'll see if I can circulate it. I'm a bit wary because I'm doing it by proxy for the Labour Party, and I don't want to do that. They're quite capable of presenting themselves. But as I said, they absented themselves very deliberately from the meeting tonight, and we'll address that at the next meeting of this committee. And nothing else?
Thank you, Chair. Just on adding to the work plan, really, there's a couple of items I think that haven't reached conclusion from last year's rounds, and that was the housing needs register and the provision of graveyards. And I'm not sure if the graveyards one falls into this.
CEP. In September. It's going to that committee in September. The cemeteries are, and the housing need register will come to us. CEP. Communities, environment. Okay, there's your answer. And under the whole housing thing about the housing needs register and everything else, that's encapsulated in that whole topic, which is one of the items, in fact, that the Labour Party have mentioned. Labour group have mentioned, I beg your pardon. That's it. Right, that is all on the agenda this evening. The next meeting of this committee will be on the 11th of September 2014, and I will endeavour to get any papers, more detailed information on the topics we've got currently on that date to members at the earliest possible time. Bearing in mind we've got the August break, kind of, but it'll be out maybe sometime in August or as soon as we can. Thank you very much, members. Meeting's closed at 8:50.